gentlemen, welcome to Them Nerds Fantasy Friday. Today, we are going to play a little bit of armchair quarterback with one of my very favorite properties, and that is Spider-Man. Specifically, we are going to do a little bit of connection between the amazing animated film Spider-Man Into the SpiderVerse and what we currently have and are looking to have in the MCU in terms of Spider-Man. I loved Into the SpiderVerse. Jerry, we've got Tom Holland's very, very good Spider-Man. We've got Tom Hardy's Venom. We've got an upcoming live-action Spider-Woman movie that we talked about on a previous show. We also, if we are going to get into a multiverse situation, we have Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield as Spider-Men. How do you see a Spider-Verse style film coming into the MCU, especially since we're going to be getting kind of a multiverse situation in the MCU anyway? How would you see it playing out?
I think if I was going to do it, I would do it similar to how they did it in the comics, which was the destruction of the Ultimate storyline, where they had, the destruction of all the worlds, and but it combining into the battle world. And so you can still have multiple characters from different, multiverses or different universes crash into one and create one grouping.
Right. Yeah, that would be cool. I love the idea of so many different versions of Spider-Man existing out in the world. I would love to see some of the same characters that we saw from the animated Into the Spider-Verse film. I would not do a live-action Into the Spider-Verse style film if we didn't bring back Tobey Maguire and Andrew Garfield. I love the idea of both of them being involved in some capacity, even if it's just kind of in passing, like, oh, hey, this is a Spider-Man from this other world. It's just kind of a cool little nod to the previous appearances. The characters that would be most important to bring in if we were going to do a sort of Into the Spider-Verse, live-action port would be Miles Morales and Gwen Stacy as Spider-Gwen. And I took the liberty of fan casting those two spots. I actually like Haley Steinfeld's performance as the voice of Spider-Gwen, and I would like to see her as the live-action Spider-Gwen as well. I think she would be great. As far as Miles Morales, this may not be a popular pick, but I think that since he plays younger even than Peter Parker, I would choose Caleb McLaughlin from Stranger Things. I think that he's young enough, and I think that he would be great in that role. The kind of off-the-wall character that I would like to see make their way from Into the Spider-Verse into a live-action version would be Nicolas Cage as Spider-Man Noir. He was one of my favorite parts of the animated film. Such a cool little, kind of pocket version of Spider-Man. What about villains? Look at all the cool villains we've gotten so far in the MCU. How would you bring in villains? Who would you bring in?
I think I would do for sure. Doc Ock, who I thought would be played great by Josh Gad from the voice of Olaf. He's usually plays more comedic roles, but I think that it can also a lot of times comedy can run very closely to insane, which is kind of the way that I like Doc Ock being played, anyways. Where
Yes.
he's so intelligent that he's kind of crazy.
Yeah.
And then I also think that you've gone through two movies that have done very well, where you have no mention really of the Osborns, and I think that it would be a really smart idea to say that the reason why you haven't heard about them in this MCU is because they're from a different MCU.
Yeah.
And so when the worlds collide, that's how you get these characters brought in. So I thought that Harry Osborn could be played by Asa Butterfield from Ender Games. And I thought this completely weird, but it would be Norman Osborn being Tom Cruise.
I could see that.
Yeah. And then I also did a little bit of fan casting for Miles Morales, and I chose Marcus Scribman from Blackish. And I already mentioned who I thought Gwen Stacy should be played by, which is that Shipka
Kiernan Shipka?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, from
Sabrina.
Chilling Adventures of Sabrina.
Right. Yeah, she would be great.
So yeah, but I think that they have a real opportunity if they were to do it this way, where they start introducing these other Spider-Mans or Spider Worlds, and then have it crash together, and then you can bring in characters that uh, haven't been seen yet, and there's not really an explanation of why you haven't seen them.
Right. Yeah. We've got some villains that have already been introduced. Of course, Venom is being played as basically a hero from the very beginning. But you know, in the comics, of course, he was a villain for a very long time. But we've already been introduced to Michael Keaton's Adrian Toomes, aka the Vulture, and he had contact with Mac Gargan, aka the Scorpion, who, by the way, also becomes Venom at one point. So that could be something they play into to keep Tom Hardy's Venom as a hero. We've seen the Shocker. And we've also seen Donald Glover, who doesn't really have a major role, but he is he's the character that will become the Prowler, who is Miles Morales' uncle. And he even mentions in Homecoming, he mentions his nephew, and that's kind of a little nod to that. And I would love to see Donald Glover continue playing that role. There are a couple of villains that I would like to see. You mentioned Doc Ock. I like the idea of Doc Ock being a woman, such as she was in Into the SpiderVerse. You could even have a situation where you have two. If we could have Josh Gad playing Doc Ock as Otto Octavius, and then have some really great comedic actress playing the female version, they could kind of play off of each other, and that would be kind of a cool dynamic too. The one villain that I want to see come into the MCU as it stands now is Vincent D'Onofrio's Kingpin. He is amazing in that role. I'm sad. I cry myself to sleep every night over the loss of the Netflix MCU series. And I would love to see him come back as a huge adversary for Spidey.
Yeah, I believe that he shouldn't be recasted either. I think he played that role perfectly.
No way. He nailed it. This is a conversation for another time, but man, did they nail the villains on those Netflix shows.
Yeah.
I mean, Purple Man and Kingpin and
Cottonmouth.
Cottonmouth, so good. Of course, now he's Blade, so we
Yeah.
can't really. I mean, plus he's spoilers. He's
Yeah.
dead.
I'm not as in knowledgeable about the whole Spider-Verse, but I know that they talked about also making a movie. I think it was called Madam Web, or
Yes.
and I believe she's also in Into the Spider-Verse, right?
Not explicitly. I think there's some insinuation.
Yeah.
But yeah, she's kind of like this sort of spectral, sort of above everything sort of character, and she kind of helps tie together why there are so many people throughout all of these comics who have these kind of spider-based powers, and there's some pretty cool arcs with her.
Well, if I was going to cast her, I'd pick Diane Keaton.
I could see that. See that. That'd be good.
Because she's crazy.
I like the idea of doing a live action Into the Spider-Verse because I want to see some of the goofy, off the wall Spider-Man characters that I love as a huge fan of the Spider-Man comics. You know, we talked in a previous show about how I like the X-Men, but I don't like the X-Men as much as Jerry likes the X-Men. I think it's kind of the opposite with Spider-Man. We both enjoy Spider-Man, but Spider-Man was kind of my big one growing up. I would love to see at the end of spoilers, at the end of Into the Spider-Verse, we have a post-credit scene where we're introduced to Spidey 2099, which was one of my favorite comics growing up. I would love to see some iteration of that. I'd also like to see, if we're going to bring in the Fantastic Four at some point, the Future Foundation version of Spider-Man, where he is kind of, he has a different suit and he's sort of taking on this different role. Ben Reilly, and he's the Spider-Man clone who becomes the Scarlet Spider. I'd love to see that play out on screen. Penny Parker, who is the young girl in Into the SpiderVerse, who controls the large robot. I would love to see her get introduced, and maybe they could retcon her origin for like a Stark connection. I would love to see something like that. They've obviously got the CGI skill to do something like her robot, because it's not that far off from the Hulkbuster Iron Man armor, really.
Yeah.
And this is such a goofy thing. It was only a 4-issue comic arc, but it was one of my very favorites. Spider-Man India. It's the story of Spider-Man, but instead of Peter Parker, it's Paviter Prabhakar, and I would love to see, and if anybody who's watched all of our shows up to this point, there's like a few of you, you know that I love The Guild, TV show The Guild. I would have Spider-Man India brought in and played by Sandeep Parikh, who plays the character Zabu on The Guild. By the time I'm done fan casting the MCU, the entire cast of The Guild is going to be in the MCU at this point. But there are just so many options for Spidey, and Sony should jump all over these options, because with their connection to the MCU, the more Spider-Man they put out, the more money goes in their pocket.
Exactly.
Right. All right. Before I go off on a massive tangent that makes this video 13 and a half hours long, is there anything else Spidey-wise that you could see showing up in these, in this sort of fantasy Into the SpiderVerse?
I would just hope to see like maybe some Super Friends.
Right. We could.
Were they the Super Friends, or was that, who knows? But they had friends.
Spider-Man and his amazing friends.
Amazing friends.
Right. Iceman and Firestar.
Yeah.
One of the most poorly animated shows that I've ever seen, but it was a good show.
It was a cult classic.
It is. And I guess we're in that cult.
Yeah.
All right. Don't drink the Kool-Aid. All right. That will be it for us on this Fantasy Friday. Don't forget to like and subscribe and follow us on social media at We Them Nerds. Thank you. Be good to each other. Goodbye.